Good morning, everybody. This is Michael from Spades Consulting, and we are going to talk about the kind of the biggest thing going on right now, which is the Minnesota. What was it? Not Ethiopian. The Somali fraud daycare scheme, and the fact that Jesus Christ, honestly, I'm gonna be completely truthful with you guys. I am not surprised in the slightest, and I don't really care that much. I mean, given I do kind of care, obviously, but at the same time, it's just like, what in the hell did you expect? Now, given the fact that they've essentially scammed the U.S., well, Minnesota's government and the federal government by extension, because of housing subsidies too and everything else, they've effectively scammed the U.S. out of, I think the number was mm, 8 to 11 aircraft carriers worth of money and resources, which is pretty goddamn impressive. It's pretty impressive. Does it surprise you that a weasel like Waltz, it's Waltz, right? Yeah, Walls, whatever. Does it surprise you that a another political weasel like Waltz essentially let this continue to happen? And this ties into the great replacement theory pretty well, obviously. I mean, if you found this channel, you probably have already heard, or if you at least have eyes to see and ears to hear, you should know pretty well what the idea of the great replacement is, which is get rid of the white guys and white women, too. Of course, liberal women tend to forget that part, but get rid of the white guys, flood the West with migrants, and essentially have the migrants outcompete people for jobs. And then if you're white, you have no job, you have no future, you have no possibilities. Obviously, you're out of the dating pool. And yeah, anything you have is slowly undermined by the migrant invasions and all of the increasing tax burden that gets put on you as you try like hell to succeed in the worst economy of my lifetime. Um, just goes to funding little black and brown people over you. All right. This is no surprise. And honestly, I was trying to find a little bit of fire to really care anymore. But this is the thing. Part of the reason why I'm so monotone and monotonous just in my execution is because I already know this. I already expect it and I don't really care. All right? It's like a shocker when you bring in a bunch of brown people and give them free money, you get more brown people and you have to give them more free money. And shocker, they keep coming. They keep coming. You keep losing money. You have to increase taxes on everybody else to prop up this pipeline, and nobody cares. I mean, people care, but it's a joke. It honestly is a joke. Honestly, when it comes to people getting fed up and irritated about the politics, believe me, I totally get it. I also have some interesting political ideas that obviously, you can't talk about certain things in mixed company, generally. Some ideas aren't exactly, mm, can't exactly be sanitized for the wider public. All right. This is the thing. Honestly, it's the biggest oddity that because I focus so heavily on duality, the fact that, you look at the right, the traditional right, they're correct on certain things. And then a lot of it, is them putting their heads incredibly far up their asses because they don't want to acknowledge an entire other half of the argument. And then the left, of course, has some things that they're right on, and their heads are even further rammed up their asses. It's pathetic. It's fucking pathetic because we are supposed to be one country. Um, and we are supposed to have states' rights, and we're supposed to, have little experiments essentially, to just like Fallout Vaults. Every single state is essentially, for the most part, it's supposed to be its own little experiment. But of course, everybody wants to be the top dog. Everybody wants to grandstand. Everybody wants to get to the point of uniform order across everything, everywhere. And honestly, it's the one reason why when I look at the political situation going long term, I really do not see the federal government remaining relevant to normal people's lives when you just look at the debts alone. At a certain point, we're going to lose the ability to shovel our garbage ass dollars and our garbage ass treasury bills all over the world. Okay. Now, we're already running into a decent amount of that. That's part of the reason why inflation is so bad. Although, given Donald definitely did not help that. Um, but part of the reason why inflation is so bad is the Fed has to monetize the debt. Which, I mean, they've been doing ever since 2008. Don't let them bullshit you. They've been monetizing the debt instead of offloading the liabilities, risks. No. The Fed just prints money, hands it to the government. All right. Which is why, whether we like it or not, everything that Trump has done so far has, even if with the executive orders, because executive orders, he could just go back and destroy them all. Anybody who follows Trump, if anybody follows Trump, whether they like it or not, they're going to be committed to the shifting of America back into a fleet and being on its own territory and not global policemen anymore. Okay? And that's just the reality. All right? We'll actually have to produce things in this country again, and we'll actually have to sustain ourselves off our own production. The rise of the billionaire class, that's going to run into more and more problems. All right? Especially when you tie into the fact, let me jump over to that. Going after BlackRock, now given AI overview, don't even pay too much attention to it, but supposedly, the big DT is looking at banning, at least to a certain extent, banning BlackRock, Blackstone, all the other major corporations that have been buying up houses off the market, even though they claim not to, whilst they secretly rebrand and hide the shit on their books. He's talking about banning them from being able to buy up single family homes and soon enough, probably any kind of public property, which is kind of necessary. All right. It's a necessity for the sole purpose that, again, touching on the duality before we jump to that, when it comes to the overall duality view, okay? If Trump gets his way, we will essentially be in some form of pseudo communism. I mean, we already are largely kind of a communist country, whether people want to admit that or not. I mean, obviously, shit still sucks. But we are in effectively a communist country. We spend more on public welfare programs than the Chinese do, which is insane. But in a lot of cases, we spend double what China spends. Although, to be fair, that there is also the part of the equation where the government cuts deals with corporations and ends up paying double or triple what they should be paying. So that is kind of a problem. But regardless, God, I'm going everywhere in the weeds here. But essentially, if the traditional right gets its way, we get some kind of communist result, regardless. If the left gets its way, uh, this is the thing. I don't necessarily want to play a side. I don't. I don't. Um, to the extent that my personal opinion applies, I think we should stop letting people into this country willy nilly. I think we should have border enforcement at the same level that other countries do: armed guards, landmines, attack dogs, drone defenses, everything. You know, we can even set up old medieval turrets and put cannons on them. Why the hell not? And people don't like that, obviously. The left is very inclined to say, keep letting them in. We've screwed these people in the past. And it's just like, funny. The people who cry the loudest about all of these poor oppressed peoples all over the planet seem to really like the dictatorial regimes that they came from, and they really weren't complaining too much about the fact that the prices for the shit that they were buying was so low for so long. You know, it's just like, oh, the poor Chinese. And they keep going and buying the cheap garbage that comes out of China. It's just like, you have other options. You have other options. But you really need the fucking dolls, whatever the fuck they're called. You really need those because for whatever reason, the marketing was just so goddamn good. And the scarcity. My God. God forbid you don't have a stupid fucking stuffed animal to do demonic fucking shit with. You know? But the left is very much inclined to keep flooding people in. And it's just like you realize, and this is the thing too, like I've seen so many. There are so many of these where it's just people nonstop complaining that they can't afford to live, can't afford to live, can't afford to live. Shit's too expensive. They can't afford to live. They're struggling. Now, given the videos on their own are a gigantic cash cow um, for the people putting them up, but especially the people who are just going out and clipping everything together. People living in their cars, everything else. Yep. Yep. It's terrible shit. But at the same time, how many of these people who are living in their cars now were jumping up and down for Biden, for Obama, for Kamala, for any of the lefties? Like, you do realize, like, the cognitive dissonance is in such massively high effect that they can't see past the bullshit. They can't see past their own bullshit. Their ability to uh, self-reflect and self-criticize, at least in this regard, is completely fucking shot. All right, that's the fucking truth of it. Because they will continue to vote for the left, vote for the left, vote for the left, vote for the left, and shocker, the cost of housing goes up, the cost of food goes up. It You're last in line to get something like housing assistance if you are incredibly fucking broke. and you are living in a city, I don't know why you're trying to live in a city, but whatever, and you have to compete as a little white girl or a white dude or any other race, honestly, like, this is the thing, it's not just white people that get affected by this. It's American blacks, it's American Hispanics, it's anybody who is actually legal in this country has to compete with a flood of foreigners coming in who are getting preferential access, they're getting preferential treatment, so meanwhile, whilst you're stuck living in your car, oh, you have these interesting migrant people coming in, and they're getting the Section 8. And once the roles are filled up, because this is a problem in a lot of cities and the areas around cities where people are legitimately broke, they're stuck living in their cars because they can't get the housing assistance because they literally gave all of the housing to Muslim migrants, to African migrants, to anybody from any country on the planet that we have been bombing for the past 20 years. And on top of it, too, it's just like you not only are you screwing yourselves by just sitting there like, yes, let all the people in, you're driving up the cost of living with it. You're literally, it's suicidal economics. All right. You keep bringing people in, they need resources. I'm not gonna, just at base, they need resources to survive. They're probably going to get those resources from the governments. Now, this has been a problem all over Europe, and I'm pretty sure it was the Danes, I'm not sure, Danes or Netherlands, essentially started shipping all of them back. Because what ended up happening is they let in all of these quote unquote refugees and they filled up the welfare rolls, they took up all the housing, and then all of a sudden, all of the young people couldn't afford shit. They couldn't afford shit. And guess what? Whether you like, welfare nascently has a criminal aspect to it. This is the thing. It is naturally conducive to it. If you're stuck living on welfare, okay, if you are completely stuck, like when we talk about the welfare trap, if you are legitimately locked in, all right, there is no way out because the second that you make an extra dollar, let's say you're trying to save up to buy a car or something, you can't save up to buy a car in this economy. You can't. You can't. This is the reality. Unless you're living with your parents or you got a really high paying job that propels you out of the welfare trap, you're not getting you're you're not getting a car by saving $20 paycheck working a part-time job. It's not going to happen. All right, it's literally the same thing with the millennials and the younger generations, Gen X too. I won't forget you, where you can't afford a house because they literally have been rising faster than you can even save. So you're talking about having to save 20% of your paycheck, 30, 40, 50, and it's just, you can't do it. And then at that point, ties into people not paying their bills anymore and just running up the credit cards and borrowing tapping every single loan that they could possibly get with no intention of ever paying it back. Because what the hell is the point of a credit score? The point of a credit score was to help you qualify for houses, for cars. If you can't afford houses or cars, what the fuck's the point in maintaining the credit score? So all of those are crashing. Oh, but with how much it may seem like I'm bashing on the left, honestly, when it comes down to it, I still stand behind a small form communism. This is the thing. It's just where I land. Because when you look at the traditional right, what the hell does the traditional right come out of? It comes out of effectively local communism. All right. The rural areas where people are so fucking poor they don't have a pot to piss in, they tend to work together. They work together real well. They all come out of poverty and they're all trying to grind their way out. At least a good chunk are. All right. But there's a natural communal action to those small towns that barely exist anymore. When you look at the lefty types, these are people that come out of the cities, they're guaranteed to be neurotic just because they lived and grew up in the cities. So you have to be even more aware. Your brain is constantly on fucking hyperdrive trying to hold on to what you have because you're in the city. People are there, they're going to try to take what you got. All right. As the thing, when the left preaches communism, it's a fucking joke. It's a joke because the reality is you can achieve communism in reasonably well in small rural communities. You can't pull that shit off in a city. You can't pull that off in a city because one of the things that binds a legitimately communal society is you have to know your neighbors. You have to know the people around you. You have to know the people in the area. Okay? If you have so many people in the fucking cities that you can't possibly keep track of who's playing by the rules and who isn't, who's doing good and who aren't. You know, when touching back to the welfare trap, when you look at the welfare trap, there are only two ways to get out of the welfare trap. All right. Oh, three ways. Giggity. Three ways to get out of the welfare trap. One, you cannot just, you essentially have to hold back your productive capacity and develop yourself to the point where you rocket out of poverty. Like, you can't just get a 10% pay bump every year or two. Like, you've got to go from broke as a joke to, okay, now you somehow have a degree for literal rocket science. And you get a job offer for $100K a year and you're out. Okay. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to rob, cheat, and steal. That is not exactly the most successful strategy for getting out of poverty. But it also ties in with things like under the table jobs, that kind of shit, which is still fairly common, especially now that we've thrown out all the illegals. But at the very least, it is still getting our own people a leg up. Chances starting a business when you're broke as a joke, pretty low. At least a legitimate one, pretty low. The only other way out of the welfare trap is essentially interfamilial and friend-based communism, collectivism. It's the only other way out of it. Because when you don't have shit for resources, if you get together with a group of other people that you trust is an important thing. This is why communism doesn't work with cities. When you have a decent amount of trust and you can pool resources with a bunch of other people, collectively, you can lift the whole out of poverty. You can lift all of each other up and out because you have more resources to work with. You can redirect them as needed. It's a simple way to do shit, and it works as long as you have the trust there. If trust is gone, good fucking luck. All right. Honestly, the right would be a lot better off switching to that kind of modality, switching to that kind of thinking, because how the hell do you defeat the left in terms of political discourse? That's the way to do it. That is the way to do it. Anyway, shocker. We imported a bunch of black and brown people from countries that we've bombed for 20 years, more than 20 years. And not only have they been largely unproductive, they have looted and pillaged legally from the tax income, or from the taxes that people who do go out and work their asses off every day pay. Shocker. Who could have seen that coming? And it'll continue. It'll continue. There were stories coming out. Oh God, what the hell does the left call her? DHS Barbie or some shit. I don't know. Talking about how they're going after people, and it's just like you're going, like, the people you're locking up for that shit have, like, these cases started in 2022. It's been a while. You haven't done shit. Shut the fuck up. Honestly, when it comes down to it, I don't give a fuck about the left or the right. I think the fact that we still talk about the fucking politics is a fucking joke. They all go to the same island. All right? You can't even dispute it. They all go to the same island. All right? Really, what it comes down to, and this, I suppose this is a decent note to end on, because obviously I've gone off. I'm in a whole different continent now. What it comes down to is, if you want to be wealthy and successful, the system is not conducive to it. The only way that people are actually going to achieve freedom is in small pockets, particularly in rural areas, small pockets where people know each other, where people can work together, and they all know each other's character flaws and issues and drama. But small collective groups in the rural hinterlands that focus on not, uh, it's not ZAT evasion, to specifically structure your areas to reduce taxable events. Okay? That is the one thing. Like, people have been talking about ZAT revolts, and just based on this and based on the fact that we're bombing other countries, and okay, whatever. Going into Venezuela, and the next one will be Colombia, Cuba, Panama eventually, like the Monroe Doctrine 2.0. It's just like, yeah, that's probably gonna happen. To be fair, if these countries weren't shitholes, which, by the way, 60 was, I think, 60 members. I forget if it was 60 members or 60% of the House and Senate accepted money from Venezuela. Like, this is a thing. What a lot of people don't seem to understand is that, like, you look at the politicians and you look to them to make changes. The reality is you have no idea just how many of those kind of connections these people have. Like, for all you know, oh God, what? Well, we'll just use first name basis. For all you know, Nancy might be in charge of the entire Mexican cartel system. All right. legitimately. This is the thing. There's no openness. Nobody has any idea. All right, but the American politicians, they could each have their own. They could all be sponsoring their own little cartels, and then they make profit on the back end. And because they are in a position of power, of course, they can force the enforcement arms to look the other way for certain shipments. You know? This is the world we live. This is the real world. This isn't fucking fantasy land. This is the real world. But coming back to the bright note is if you don't want to support the system, the only option people really have is to eliminate taxable events. All right. If you don't want to participate, if you do not want to financially participate in the system anymore, then essentially you go back to barter. You go back to barter systems. Okay. And simple enough, you cut deals with people and you trade whatever you can do, whatever you can make based on whatever you have at your disposal in return for whatever they make, whatever they can produce based on whatever tools they have at their disposal. It comes back to one of the videos that I did a while back. Oh, God. 1 second. What was that called? I think it was Every Home Trade Shop, but it was one of the old ideas I had back in the day, which would essentially produce that communal function. Let me see. Yeah, Every Home and Trade Shop. 0 views. Fantastic. I'm shocked. Honestly, I don't blame you if, obviously it's a company, but it's a thing. I'm not necessarily trying to sell you on consulting. This is all product of my personal opinion, all right, of my personal beliefs. Just like when I get everybody else onboarded to it, they'll also be throwing out their opinions and ideas, and you might like some of their opinions better. You might want to bullshit with them, talk to them for a bit. You might want some of their advice. That's okay. That's okay. But coming back to it, if you turn every home into a trade shop, essentially you can produce on smaller scales. Everybody produces, and then you just exchange between each other, cut the dollar out completely. No debt, no borrowing, no financing, none of that bullshit. And boom, there you go. You don't have to participate anymore. You're not creating taxable events. All right. And you just have to figure out how to stretch that all throughout the supply chain. All right. And honestly, people would probably be happier and grateful to participate in that system versus the system where you work your ass into the grave for wages that are fucking pittance. Because this is the reality. Like right now, in my region, the fair rate, because what, 3 years ago, the fair rate you could say was 20 an hour with all the inflation that we've had and the cost of living rising. The the value of an hour of competent labor that isn't coming to work drunk or high and can do not just low speed activity, but you know fast paced, stressful work. You're looking at paying 28 to 35 an hour for a decent worker now. All right. And by the halfway through the year, we're probably looking at, if the inflation continues on, halfway through the year, you're probably looking, shocks included, you're probably looking at 36 to 44 an hour for a competent American worker who will show up and do the work and do it well. All right. The fact that most of the jobs pay so poorly that you will never own a car, you will never own a house, you'll never own a couch at the rate that we're moving in this economy. Fortune favors people who front run these problems. All right. So it's a thing. You want to develop yourself and develop your neighborhoods. You want to develop the people yourself, the people around you to the best extent that you can, and ideally start working around the system, not participating in it, because you're more likely, legitimately, you're more likely to get a house and to get the wife and to get the kids and get the American dream by participating in a barter economy than you are by participating in this one. This one is crashing and burning. Okay? It's crashing and burning. And the reality that we got to touch on the abstraction before we close out. The reason why you can flood in a bunch of migrants, because this is the thing, what a lot of people don't realize is the United States is essentially fighting a war on all fronts, and most people don't know it, and the politicians themselves don't necessarily know it. Although a good chunk of them are keyed in and are benefiting from it. Here's the reality. You have, at the sovereign level, you have foreign countries working as hard as they can to destabilize, subvert, and otherwise influence the United States into one direction or another, both leading to capitulation. All right. On the sovereign side of things, it's more public, it's more understood. All right. Given you don't get all of the details, you don't know everything that's going on. But then there's also the other level of it, which is your New World Order type organizations, the non-governmental organizations, NGOs, corporate backed, corporate owned. These organizations and fronts, whilst they do also are set up to do regime changes and the like, regime changes seem to always go in one direction. The country gets a central bank and interesting things. But if you remember good old Klaus before he was replaced by, I think, Larry Fink, one of the key drivers for trying to get the Great Reset going was you essentially had to destabilize the Western countries to the point where they were begging, the populations were begging for mercy, begging for any alternative. Shocker, look where we are. All right, this is kind of a thing. This is why you can't necessarily trust Orange Man. You can't necessarily trust a single goddamn thing he says or does, because he seems to be more so moving in the direction that they would want versus the direction that the people of this country want. Okay? One, it's Hegelian dialectic. You create the chaos and then you offer the solution that you wanted. Because if you tried to sell people on digital IDs, vax mandates, all that, they're very they're going to fight back at every opportunity. All right. They're not going to let that happen. On the other hand, if you trigger absolute chaos that drives people into madness and paranoia and put them in a position where they're terrified, they will sign away their rights at the drop of a hat. They'll do anything just to feel safe again. Okay. I don't know if Orange Man is working with them or working counter to them, but what I do know is that they seem to be gaining speed because both, if there is a both directions to that, they're all kind of leading to the same place. It's just different flavors of the same shit. All right. The reality is the corporations have gotten to the point where most of your big evil corporations that you expect have gotten to the point where they have more power and influence than entire governments. All right, like Nestle is has a higher earnings than the entire GDP of Italy. All right, that's bad because this is the thing. Like when it comes to global power brokers and global wealth, what good is it to own shares and equities and bonds? Like it's child's play. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. The reality is like why the fuck would you own shares when you can own entire countries? You own their water supply. You own their air eventually. You own their air supply. You own everything off the coast. You own everything in their fishing waters. You license everything out and then you rig the game so normal people can't get fishing licenses. And next thing you know, and little branch off subdivision corporations are doing all the fishing and all the mining and they're controlling everything, and then you own the population by proxy. Essentially, you have the sovereign level that, is running into all the usual issues that you'd expect, but then you also have a new developing level above it where essentially the corporations are trying to globally usurp national governments and literally claim the entire planet and structure everything in a way because corporations become more bureaucratic over time and the countries, the national governments are becoming more corporatized over time. Because they're so interlinked, this leads to de facto fascism where these NGOs, these private organizations, these billionaires, these ultra rich will essentially get to the point where they will control the entire planet unless something massive happens, unless there's a massive shift. When you were born, you were not told that once you got older, but the US dollar, modern economics, all of this shit is not. You weren't born to exchange scraps of garbage paper. You don't have to participate in that system. Creating an alternative is a bitch and a half, I'll grant you, but you can create an alternative. All right. One of the biggest reasons why the left is so often problematic is because the left constantly preaches that they want to change the system. They want to change the existing system. The reality is the left could not produce a legitimately stable system to compete with the current one. So they rant, they rave, they scream, they bitch, they complain because they can't create a better system because their viewpoint, their way of looking at the world is fucking garbage. It's fucking garbage. Like the entire leftist message is so heavily based on generalizations about people and their behaviors and their attitude and their compliance levels and everything else. It's just like this is the reason why American quote unquote capitalism has been able to continue chugging along, even though it's poorly. We're half out of coal and we're all out of water. It's literally just the steam that's left from the past 60 years that's keeping this fucking shithole going. All right. the left can't create a legitimately uh, countering system. You see what they did with their oh fuck, their occupied zones. Yeah, it's just like, all right, did you guys grow anything? Could you manage to set up actual production and logistics? Could you figure out how to make medicine and treat people? No, no, you couldn't. No, you couldn't, because all of your exposure is in the cities. You don't know how to actually produce a goddamn thing. You expect people in the rural areas to work harder and harder to prop up your idea of the communist vision, and it's a fucking joke. It's a fucking joke because people are already working themselves into the fucking ground. They can't give you any more. And if you flood in foreign labor without having a massive, massive change to the economic structure of the country, what the fuck do you think is going to happen? People aren't just going to fucking sit there and starve, especially in the rural areas. They're not going to sit there and starve. At some point, they're going to do what they got to do. All right. But anyway, I know it's a bit conspiratorial, but it is the truth. It is the truth. Also, I'm sorry that I've had you guys on the same image. Let me pull up Fluffy Bunnies or something. Fluffy Bunnies. There we go. Isn't that sweet? Look at that guy. Fantastic. All right. But I know it is very kind of conspiratorial, although what counts as conspiracy now is a lot different than what it was 10 years ago. It is a thing. Corporations that have gotten to the size where they're bigger than countries, they're not multinational, they're international, and they're essentially countries in their own right on paper. They are collectively working together to try to destabilize things to their benefit. Because coming back to Klaus, the World Economic Forum, the WEF, coming back to them and their bullshit, so inflation might not necessarily be legitimately as bad, but the cost of living keeps going up even faster than inflation. Now, a certain amount of that is trying to front run the inflation, so you charge more now, so you make up for the unforeseen losses that you'll accumulate as the purchasing power goes down, and then you should come out relatively even. If you know that prices are going to be 10%, they're going to slowly rise, then, you cover your ass, all right? But But if you and your little corporate friends come up with the idea to officially, unofficially, jack up prices beyond the inflation rate, keep wages especially suppressed, and create a situation where not only are people poor, they're homeless, they're starving, they're desperate, they don't have health care, and all of the other things. And next thing you know, you turn around and you and all your corpo buds, all right, pull the buds, and you go cut a deal with the government to increase your own power and increase the standing and the legitimacy of the NGO world order, all right, over the entire planet. All right, I forget the trade agreements a while back. Oh, I think it was it's like the East Asian. Give me 1 second here. Whoops. Whoop. All right, there we go. Oh God. Pacific Trade Agreement. Was it the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Yeah. Essentially, things like these trade agreements are quietly and not so quietly backed by corporates. So essentially, one of the major parts of Trans-Pacific Partnership was to create a separate court that would be above American courts, Australian courts, Canadian courts, Chilean, Japanese, Malaysian, Mexican, New Zealand, Peruvian, Singaporean, Vietnamese, like to create an international trade court that would oversee all of it. And a large part of it would be taking sovereignty away from these countries so that the International Court of Unelected, Appointed Dickbags could then do things like force certain prices down or block certain countries from being able to export to others. All right, for instance, if a certain country were to run their currency into the ground to stimulate their export market, then you can go to the international court and essentially block them from being able to export. Now, on a certain aspect, that could be beneficial. On another aspect, it depends on who ends up in the positions of power. And it depends very much so on where their political leanings are and what countries they answer to. What essentially would have happened is it would be another vector to extort the United States, mostly. Um, which, I mean, would be great for other countries, sure, but it would severely handicap us and put us in a position where we are answerable to anyone else. All right. And it would, on the sovereign level, it doesn't necessarily make as much sense, but on the NGO global corporate takeover level, corporations would essentially be able to effectively decide what they're going to pay completely above the normal system, what they're going to pay for X, Y, and Z, and essentially force down prices, which would then force down earnings for the smaller miners that aren't necessarily controlled or are insured against their losses, and essentially fuck over the workforces. It would fuck over the Australian miners. It would fuck over the Malaysian fishing industry. It would fuck over the what the hell does Chile produce? Obviously, chilies. It would fuck over all of the countries, more so their people, the workforces, as they try to essentially create their own overarching effectively techno-communistic system to set prices to whatever the fuck they want to pay and fuck anybody else. All right. This is one of the overarching problems. Back to fluffy bunnies. This is one of the overarching problems with capitalism. Whenever the right talks about capitalism, just like the left, this is one thing that always got on my nerves. The left always comes out and says that's not real socialism, that's not real communism, and the right will hammer them on that all day long. But the right is just as bad. That's not real capitalism, it's crony capitalism. No, it's a fucking joke. It's a fucking joke. All of these idealized systems, the problem is we don't live in a fucking ideal world. We live in the real world. Idealism does not survive long. All right? Idealism survives up until the point that somebody who can benefit very much so by breaking with the ideals decides to wipe out the idealists, which is where the whole useful idiots strategy comes into play. Use people to preach standard communism, standard capitalism. They preach it, you get it, and next thing you know, the Politburo is telling you who you can and cannot screw, and where you can and cannot live, and whether you have to live in group housing with the people they just let out of the prisons, or Eh, on the capitalist side, you have people preaching capitalism. Meanwhile, you have corporations right now, and again, this is not, protected information for me to say this, but here's the thing: the American economy and most of the Western economies are legitimately grinding to a halt. Maybe not a complete collapse, but they're grinding to a halt. The only way, especially with the war rhetoric building up, the most successful strategy for corporations right now, for smaller corporations, not we're going to take over the fucking world corporations. The smartest choice that you can make as a normal corporation, large business, medium business, small business, you want to be selling shit to the government. All right. Government, especially during wartime, government becomes a massive part of the GDP. All right. The best position that you could possibly be in is selling shit to desperate governments. All right. And that's where things are moving. That's where things are moving. For example, anybody who's ever seen, uh, shit, oh, what would be a good example? Um, Anybody who has seen job listings on Indeed that were asking for applicants with top secret clearance. Okay. Now, to the average person, you're going to sit there and you're going to ask, like, why in the hell do you need a top secret clearance to make t shirts? It's simple. The more clearances you have, the more information you're privy to, and the higher up you can get. All right. If you have people on staff with top secret clearances, it can help you a lot when you're trying to contract to the government. All right. And that's fully what I predict. All right. I will stake a pretty significant bet that essentially in the prelude to sovereign level wars, you are going to see more and more. Uh, you're probably going to be looking at, if we actually end up going to war, you're probably going to see 50, 60, 70, 80% government spending to GDP. Like the government will be 80% of the GDP. My apologies. It'll be 80% of the GDP. The companies that actually survive, it's going to be companies that are selling to the government, supplying the government, giving the DOD new fucking t shirts for drills and PT. It's going to be companies that work with the government that are going to do well in the traditional sense. All right. Companies that have no business, no business asking for top secret clearances and all this other shit. There's a reason. There's a reason. All right. Trying to farm that secret data. Yes. Anyway, God, I've gone even farther into the weeds, and somehow this has turned into an hour long. So, my apologies. We started in an interesting place today and ended up in an even more conspiratorial, deeper place, but it's whatever. If you are interested in personal business and pretty soon sovereign consulting, um, of course, I doubt you're going to need sovereign consulting, but if you are interested in personal or business consulting, stepbyspadesconsulting.com, and however you want to connect, we'll connect with you. It is currently just me, lonely me, but I can assure you, as Spades grows, we are going to have quite a few other people that I do have a pretty solid roster, kind of waiting in the wings. Anyway, um, the Substack. Check in on the Substack if you're interested in more written work. I do have to admit, much like the YouTube channel, I have been letting the Substack kind of rot on the vine. But that's mostly because, honestly, I've been kind of running out of steam. I don't have the fire that I used to. I mean, I'll recover for that, but it's a thing. I'm running out of fucks to give. Behold my field of fucks, for it is barren. Um, I'm running out of fucks to give about the political situation, the economic situation, and it's just tiring. It's just tiring having to see people suffering the exact same ways again and again and again and again. I mean, it's like watching somebody step on the rake and just repeating the loop again and again and again. And it's just like the system is not designed to work for you. All right. The system for the average person, it is heavily weighted against you. All right. The system wants to get as much out of you on the sovereign level, on the political level, on the economic level, on the evil corporate NGO take over the world level. They are all trying to get and extract as much as humanly fucking possible out of you. And the more attack vectors they have, the more pinch points that they can influence you to push you to work harder, to give more, all right, to subsidize their fucking insane quests for global domination, all right, on every level. All right, just gonna end it. If you're interested in personal or business consulting, stop by spadesconsulting.com. If you are interested in written content, although I have been lacking in writing written content recently, go check out the Substack and check back here occasionally and watch some more videos, damn it. I do actually try. All right. Um, well, I can't blame you. I won't lie. I don't have the full setup going. I don't have the green screens out and the studio lighting and everything else going. I don't. Honestly, I just most things that I kind of want to talk about, most things that do kind of light a fire under my ass. You don't necessarily need to see my face to, you know, to get the content of the message. Although I will say, hello. There you go. Looking very washed out, and it's not the best picture, I know. But I also didn't have anywhere else to put the glasses, so if I look douchey there, my apologies. Regardless, this has been Michael from Spades Consulting. You guys have a good one, and I will see you next time.